Let's take a look at mastery reporting in Schoology. Mastery reporting is a really efficient and easy way inside of Schoology to view whether or not your students have attained mastery on a particular standard. Granted, this takes a little bit of setup on the front end, as with anything, but once you have it set in there, it is very easy to quickly go in and see which students have mastered particular standards or learning targets that you have set for them. To get to mastery reporting, we click on the left navigation pane under Mastery. Once I have my standards linked to either assignments, quizzes, discussions, etc., and my students have been assessed on there, I'll start to see information populating here. Clearly, I won't see that if I don't have students or don't have any learning objectives attached to anything. But here you can see my students. Here you can see my objectives that I've attached so far. And here what you can see is this is kind of like a progress bar. How many students have obtained mastery? So in this case, it's 50%. If I hover over it, I can see that only one of my two students have achieved mastery at this point. If I hover over this one, I can see that both of my students in this course have achieved mastery. So this would probably be a standard that we can move on from. This, depending on how many students I have in my class, I might need to take more time for. The other thing I can see is at what percentage the average percentage my students have of attaining mastery. I also get this grid. The stuff in green lets me know the students have achieved mastery. The stuff that's in red lets me know that they haven't achieved mastery and at what percentage. These little numbers tell me how many assignments were connected to that, and if I hover over it, I can see that the oral presentation is the only assignment that's attached to mastery for this standard. And if I hover over this, excuse me, the test is the only standard that was assessed for mastery in this case. And this is obviously something you can set up and change. So this is my student achievement category. If I click on learning objectives, because I might not remember exactly what these objectives were, what state standard 7.9.6.6 is, but if I click on it, what I will get is I will get a list of my objectives, and then I'll get an overall average for my class. So for example, I have Civil War objective number 2. I can explain how the debate over slavery resulted in compromises. And if I hover over this, I can see what my overall class percentage is. The high grade was a 75%, the low grade was a 0, and then obviously I can get my median score. And I can scroll through and I can see this for anything that was assessed using Learning Target. And it also tells me the assignment associated with it. So say I had an oral presentation and a test and a discussion attached to this particular standard, all of those would populate right here and I'd be able to view how my students did. One of the things we can do is I'm going to click on the cog here and I'm going to look at mastery settings. And here's where we have our ability to adjust the achievement levels. And granted, you are, I wouldn't say limited, but somewhat limited in what you can do. So what you're saying here is, what is mastery for my class? If my student gets a 55%, does that mean they have met their expectations? And if they are exceeding expectations, above and beyond, what percentage is that? And let's just say I'm going to bump it up to 90% is exceeding expectations. Whatever it makes sense for in your class. And you can adjust these here or with the slider. And then how many times do my students need to meet or exceed the expectations in order for me to say they've mastered it? So how many times do they take a quiz? They do an oral presentation? I can say they need to do it 1, 2, or 3. I would certainly say that we want to set this above 1. If a student has accomplished something one time, I don't know that this necessarily means that they met mastery. Maybe they got lucky, maybe the assignment was easy for them. It might make sense to just give it a couple times. I can grade overall learning objectives by the student's highest score or the average number of scores. So if they've taken it multiple times, I can instead get an average score for their grade. And I can display their achievement levels in different ways. And all I do is click Save Changes, and that sets my mastery for my particular class. Real quickly, a couple of different places where you can add learning objectives. You can add them, as I said, to discussions, quizzes, or assignments. Even you can add them to pages, but that doesn't really necessarily assess anything. If I have my discussion here, if I go ahead and click on the cog to edit that discussion, as long as I'm grading it, as long as that's my intent, if I scroll to the bottom, I can click on this little thing that says Align Learning Objectives. And this has already been covered in a couple other tutorials, so I'm not going to go through too much about it. But if I click on it, I can add any of my particular learning targets or objectives that I want to. For the time being, stay away from custom learning objectives. Custom learning objectives are things that you would have created on your own, and those don't align with mastery reporting. But as we continue to use Schoology, we will get some of your custom learning objectives and I can statements into Schoology, and then you'll be able to also align those mastery reporting. But just for the immediate time being, use either state or standards that are already in here, not stuff that you would input on your own. If I scroll down to my discussion again, I can see here my learning objectives are already attached. If I don't like one, I can click on the X and quickly remove it, and then I would save changes. Same thing can be done with a quiz. I'm going to click on the Shakespeare quiz. The great thing about quizzes is you can actually attach the individual question to a learning target. So I can be assessing for several things. I'm going to edit this question here about where was Shakespeare born. And if I scroll to the bottom, I have this advanced setting where it says align learning objectives. I do the same thing that I would have done here. Perhaps I look through Common Core or type in a key term. I'm just going to type in play. I actually think comes out theater, but let's just say that this is the particular learning target I want. I can click on it. I can click several learning objectives and click add learning objectives, and then it becomes a part of my mastery reporting. So as kids either are assessed on that target, I can determine how well they've done. So again, mastery reporting is just a quick and easy way, and if I go in mastery here, there are no students, but a quick and easy way to see how my students have done on a particular task or standards and have they met mastery. Do I need to do some reteaching of that? Do I need to do some smaller individual group work with particular students? How can I address those struggling learners? Or are we ready to move on based on the feedback or data I'm getting from mastery reporting?